Hi everyone, Staff Sergeant Will Ashmore here with Army Sports Car Racing. It is 2025 and we are back with the Sunvit-D3 Army F430. So the car has been sat since September last year when we raced at Spa. It hasn't moved for 5 months. So I'm going to be spending the next few days doing some recommissioning on the car, getting it ready because we need to have it up and running for the National Transition event at Silverstone GP Circuit on the 24th of Feb, which is about 10 days away. And I've got a lot of work to do. So yesterday I fixed the exhaust on the car. After our outing to Spa last year, we had just got into first place overall in the GT Trophy, coming up Eau Rouge, and the exhaust snapped. I will link that video right here for you to watch. It was a good start to the race. But unfortunately with the exhaust literally snapping in half, it meant that we had to effectively retire. We managed to get out at the end of the race just to get a finish, but yeah, it cut our race short. So I've repaired that exhaust. I have put in some flexible joints because the exhaust was very rigid before, and I think with the expansion of heat, the exhaust just overstressed itself and snapped. So we've now got some flexible joints in there. Actually replacing some silencers, so the exhaust will be a little bit louder as well, which I'm looking forward to hearing. Today on the car, we're going to strengthen the exhaust mounting system. I just want a bit more rigidity in the rear section of the exhaust. Now we've got that flexibility built into the system. And then over the next few days, I will be going through the entirety of the car. We're going to get the car turned over, get some fluids pumped through the engine before we actually fire the car up, just to build some oil pressure. So we'll talk about that. Also going to be working on the suspension around the car. That's quite tired after the past couple of years of racing. So there's some updates to be made there. Equally, I need to get a passenger seat in the car because I can't take any passengers in there at the moment with the big empty space, which is a rubbish job, but something I need to do. And yeah, we'll see what else we can find really. There's certain upgrades I want to make to the car. That probably won't happen before the National Transition event in 10 days' time. But I want to renew all of the air jack lines just for safety reasons when the guys are working on the car with the car up on air jacks. We've got new fuel cells to go into the car, new fuel pumps. I want to put new, more secure fuel lines on the car because these cars have a reputation of burning down. So very quickly, the plans for the year ahead. We're looking to do the entirety of the Masters GT Trophy Series. We'll see how that goes, funds depending, and a few other logistical points, because 2 of the races at the end of the year are in the Middle East, in Dubai and the UAE, so that'll be super interesting if we can get out there. But our first round, which we'll be working towards, is Brands Hatch GP. That's at the end of May, so we'll certainly be covering that. Right, I've got no time to waste, so, as always, let's crack on. Right, so as I said, I want to strengthen the exhaust mountings for the exhaust system. First thing I need to do is get the rear silencer section out of the car. Alright then, so this is the job at hand. My exhaust mount, which mounts directly to the gearbox because the whole of the exhaust system is effectively bolted to the engine and doesn't hang off of the chassis of the car in any way. Using the existing mounting holes, I'm not very proud of this setup, but it works. The exhaust sits on the car, doesn't go anywhere. But what this does have is quite a lot of flex forward and back and a lot of twist, which I just want to reduce a little bit. So what I'm going to do today is add some strengthening ribs on the top side, and then on the bottom mount, there's another mounting hole here which is 90 degrees to these holes, so I'm going to make some strengthening ribs that come down the centre and give a third mounting point for this, just to try and increase a bit of that rigidity in the exhaust. This was actually a bit of a prototype, but it worked, so I left it, so that's my excuse basically for that. exhaust is done. Happy with how that turned out. Not really much to see there, it's exactly the same as it was, but it now has some flexible joints so the exhaust can expand under heat. And we've strengthened the mounting system for the exhaust. Now I want to hear it. So what we need to do is, because this car hasn't run for 5 months, down there we've got one of the cylinder heads. We're going to pull out all of the coil packs, all of the spark plugs on both sides, and that would allow us to turn the engine over without any pressure on the engine. Clearly it's not going to fire either, but it allows us to spin the engine over and build some oil pressure. We'll just listen for any of the valve train, it should be fine. And then we can put it all back together and fire it up. Sweet, so that's the plugs removed. I can now turn the engine over. Just need to disconnect the fuel pump so we're not filling the cylinders with fuel. Build some oil pressure, just listen to the valve train, make sure everything's healthy on that side. Then we can put the plugs back in. Happy to say the plugs are in excellent condition. I've got 5 spare brand new ones annoyingly, so I'm going to buy 3 new ones to complete the set, and I'll put new plugs in later on. But we'll put the plugs back in and then we can finally fire it up. Okay, it's been a minute since this has had any power put through it. Let's just get the ignition on. So all we're looking at on the dash there then is just a build of oil pressure, and listen to the engine turnover. There she goes. So I don't know if you could hear that on camera, but you could hear just how noisy the lifters were before they built oil pressure. They're hydraulic lifters, so they rely on oil pressure to pump up effectively and build pressure to keep good clearances between the cams and the valves. But yeah, that built oil pressure nice and quick, very fine, good strong 5 bar of pressure, just turning over on the battery. So I'm quite happy with that. Just going to turn off the master switch. But yeah, I'm not sure if I just mentioned that, as you heard when the lifters built pressure, they went nice and quiet, so that was good to hear. Other than that, it spun over fine, like really nice and quiet to be honest, no major dramas there. Plugs are back in, let's give her a go. Spicy, might be too loud. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it'll settle down a little bit. Yeah, we'll see. Right, on to the next job. So then, just got the passenger seat fitted in the car. I did not film that because it's not very interesting and it's not a fun job, but that's in. So we can now take out some passengers. It's about as much fun getting into that seat as it is my seat, so anyone that's coming out on the day, look forward to that. Alright, so what I'm going to do now, just got the car up on its air jacks, up on its jack safety stands, so the car's solid and up in the air. I want to spend some time working through all of the suspension on the car, checking for any bushings that are worn out, any toe links, and any problems really. We've got a bit of a vibration in the car which I'm really trying to hunt down and understand where that's coming from. So hopefully we can find something that we need to repair. Right, so just pulled apart the rear suspension on the rear right corner. You can see the knuckle is out. Excuse me. Quite a few problems with this corner. Nothing too major, but the top ball joint bolt was completely loose. This ball joint is fairly loose. There's the tiniest amount of play. I'm going to replace that arm. Bottom ball joint is nice and tight. That's nothing wrong with that. This ball joint is nice and tight. Nothing wrong with that. But this toe arm is bent. Let me add some lights to this. So somehow this toe arm has got bent. Difficult to see, but you can just see it on that plane there, especially if I... Nah, you're not going to see it if I twist it. But there, it's bent just there. Small kink in the toe arm. And then I decided to check the wheel hub, the ball joint. That was absolutely toast. As you can see, hopefully that will focus in okay for you, but that wheel bearing is chewing itself to pieces. Fortunately, I've got a brand new spare. These are really hard to come by, and they're extremely expensive. But I've got one of these for the right hand side, I've got 3 for the left hand side, and I think actually I've got some of these hub races spare second hand without that much damage, but this is scrap, unfortunately. Right, so we've got the left-hand hub off of the car and the wheel bearing. Now the wheel bearing's split in 2, but I'm not really too concerned about that. It's quite normal for these once they've sort of bedded in. What I'm concerned about, or not concerned about on this side, is the fact that we've got a really nice, smooth, shiny race face on this side. So no wear here. When we put it into the hub, there's no crunching or grinding. That's got some real nice smooth action, so you know I haven't really got any concerns about that. One thing, when I took the hub nut out that holds the drive shaft in here and kind of clamps the 2 halves of the bearing together, the hub nut wasn't very tight. We struggle with that all season. On this side specifically, the hub nut keeps coming loose. Well, I say coming loose, we stake it, so you've got some tabs that you can bend in to lock it in, but it had sort of moved, you know, a tiny bit of a turn, which had made it just come a tiny bit loose. It wouldn't have come off, but it's just something we need to keep on top of, I think, as we go through the season. But I'm happy with this bearing, which is really good. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm going to clean out the old grease, re-grease it, give this whole hub a clean up, and then we'll look at the suspension arms on the back of the car. Right, so onto the suspension arms. So now I'm just going to look for any play whatsoever really in here. Even the smallest bit of play can give quite a big exaggerated feeling on the wheel itself. So all you do is literally just tug and pull on it. Ball joints, you want to feel for that they have their flexibility, that they're still relatively tight. They can be a little bit loose, but as long as there's no lateral play in and out, then there's no drama. This is also a ball joint, and you're just doing a very, very light push and pull just to feel if there's any movement whatsoever in any direction other than that really. But that rear toe link is solid. That's not been changed on the car so far, so that's quite good to see. I felt some play. What I felt like was in this upper bush here on this arm. You probably can't hear that, but it is just knocking there. It is not knocking there. And the ball joint is good. So I'm going to take this arm off and we'll look into this bush here. I think I've got replacement bushings for that, so we should be able to fix that without any trouble. Very slight, super slight, but again you definitely feel that in the wheel. And then the lower arm, I need to take the shock out. I didn't do that on the other side, which I need to do actually. I didn't think about it, but the shock is putting this lower arm under some downward pressure. So it may just be taking out any feel that I might get in the suspension arm itself. Very easy to take the shock out anyway, so I'm going to do that now once we've taken this arm off. Alright, so just pulled out the bottom pin on the shock, which also allows me to feel for play in the shock, and you can see there's a lot of play there in the upper shock mount. Yeah, there's a lot of play up there, so this shock's going to come out. We're going to look at this upper suspension mount. You can see that actually. Again, the upper flam block in there, which is just a plastic piece, but yeah, that's a lot of play. But the lower control arm, or the lower wishbone, is perfect actually. Ball joint's really nice and tight, and both of these flam blocks are in great condition. Right then, that's the back end all put together and done. So we need to go onto the front end now, see what's worn out. So on the front left, when I do my wobble check, I mean there is absolutely nothing on that. I've had all this apart already. I've been through the wheel bearing. I made some adjustments to a few little things, but this side was pretty good. Needed a few bushings. I actually replaced, opens a can of worms, actually replaced the bushings. I've replaced this entire lower control arm. The ball joint, although it's tight, it's sticking, so I think it's completely out of grease, and these bushings are like absolutely toast. So I had a complete spare arm that I put together. This one I can rebuild later on. Okay, so on the front right, there's a tiny knock there that I can feel. Up and down feels okay. So we'll get the wheel off and see what's loose. Well, the first problem I found instantly, disc is done. This has got some really nasty cracks in it. This disc has done nothing really. I think it's done the Silverstone Festival and Spa, which was wet for the entirety, so they shouldn't have had any major heat put through them. This is very frustrating because these are hard to find, and I think, well, I'm not going to get these discs anymore because I've been through 2 sets of these in very short period, so it's time to find something better. So luckily I had a spare brake disc that I completely forgot about. spare used, but the same one, so managed to throw that on nice and quick, and that is good to go. Next job, I want to fix I'll pull them out, but the heat shields for the exhausts are looking a bit tatty, so I've got some new perforated heat shielding, and we're going to try and repair those. Alright, so here's the heat shield. This sits alongside the hydraulic actuator system for the gearbox, for the paddle shifters. You can see it's got some fiberglass shielding on the inside, and then some of this perforated metal on the outside, which is just falling to bits, and a little bit more fiberglass there. I'm going to try and recoat this whole piece with some of this perforated sheet, so we'll see how that turns out, really. Alright, that's done. That didn't turn out too bad, really. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was, and it now feels really solid. Before it was really flexible and flapping around. This indentation here isn't really required thanks to the exhaust that I'm running. We're not running the standard cats that I think intruded into that space a little bit. Cut my hands to pieces, but yeah, that's good to go, so I'm going to bolt that back on the car. Build fitted back up, looks alright to me. There's two more heat shields that I want to repair. The ones that protect the CV boots on the drive shaft, you can see there, looking a little bit baked. So I'm going to do the same thing and just coat it in the perforated sheeting, but I won't record that because it's just doing the same thing. Separately, very quickly, I made these bolt-on silencers. Hopefully they'll get us through the day on the 24th, because the car is going to be loud. Now affectionately known as poop shooter right and left. Hopefully, like I say, they will be able to quieten down the car enough if they won't let us run without these tips fitted.